Wars have left deep scars throughout human history, affecting countless lives across generations. Among these tragic events, some conflicts have seen the deaths of innocent children, making their impact even more devastating. In the context of England's history, several wars have brought significant suffering, with children among the many victims. While most historical accounts focus on battles, strategies, and political outcomes, the human cost, especially involving vulnerable populations like children, often remains overshadowed. In today's video, we explore the untold stories of children affected by war in England. We'll uncover the causes behind these devastating conflicts, the harsh realities children faced, and how their suffering inspired powerful reforms that shaped the modern world. From historic wars like the English Civil Wars to the life-altering evacuations of World War II, their experiences reveal the true cost of war beyond the battlefield. Join us as we journey through history to learn how these young lives endured, survived, and ultimately helped create a better future for generations to come. One of the darkest chapters in England's wartime history was the bombing campaigns of World War II, particularly during the Blitz. Between 1940 and 1941, Nazi Germany launched relentless air raids on major British cities, including London, Coventry, and Birmingham. These bombings targeted both military and civilian infrastructure, causing widespread destruction. Amid the chaos, thousands of civilians lost their lives, including many children. Families were torn apart, homes reduced to rubble, and entire communities shattered. To mitigate the risk to children, the British government implemented large-scale evacuations, relocating millions of children from urban centers to the countryside. While this saved countless lives, it also separated families, leaving emotional wounds that lasted long after the war ended. Despite these precautions, not all children were fortunate enough to escape. Many perished in bombing raids, often while seeking shelter in homes or public bunkers. Another historical period where children suffered immensely was during the English Civil Wars in the 17th century. The conflict between royalist and parliamentary forces devastated towns and villages, leading to widespread famine and disease. In a time without modern humanitarian aid, children frequently became victims of malnutrition and illness, exacerbated by prolonged sieges and military campaigns. The human cost of war extends far beyond the battlefield, affecting those least responsible for its outbreak. In England's wars, children's suffering underscores the brutal reality that wars spare no one. Whether through direct violence or the indirect consequences of conflict, their lives were altered forever. Remembering these tragedies serves as a solemn reminder of the need for peace and the protection of the most vulnerable in times of crisis. Wars are often driven by a complex interplay of political, economic, social, and ideological factors. In England's history, various wars have been triggered by power struggles, territorial ambitions, religious conflicts, and competition for resources. Understanding the causes behind these wars helps illuminate why such conflicts erupted and how they ultimately led to human suffering, including the tragic deaths of children. One major cause of wars in England's past was the struggle for political power and control. The English Civil Wars of the 17th century are a prime example. Tensions between King Charles I and Parliament escalated over issues of governance, taxation, and the monarchy's authority. Charles's belief in the divine right of kings clashed with Parliament's push for greater control, culminating in armed conflict. This power struggle led to widespread violence, disrupting everyday life and causing severe hardships for civilians, including children. Territorial expansion and disputes have also played a significant role in England's wars. During the 100 Years' War between England and France, competing claims to the French throne fueled a prolonged conflict that lasted over a century. Both nations sought dominance over key regions, and the resulting battles devastated large areas. Towns were burned, food supplies were destroyed, and countless families were displaced, leaving children to face hunger, homelessness, and death. Religious differences further contributed to wars in England. The English Reformation in the 16th century, sparked by King Henry VIII's break from the Roman Catholic Church, led to decades of religious strife. Successive monarchs imposed conflicting religious policies, prompting uprisings and bloody conflicts such as the Marian persecutions and the English Armada. Religious persecution and forced conversions created a climate of fear and violence that deeply affected families, with children often suffering alongside their parents. Economic factors, including control over trade routes and access to valuable resources, also motivated wars. During the Anglo-Dutch Wars in the 17th century, England and the Dutch Republic fought over dominance in maritime trade. The conflict disrupted commerce, causing economic hardship that rippled through society. Food shortages, inflation, and poverty affected the lower classes most severely, leaving children particularly vulnerable to starvation and disease. Social unrest and class struggles have also triggered wars and internal conflicts. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 arose from widespread dissatisfaction with oppressive taxes and harsh living conditions. Although not a war in the conventional sense, this uprising saw violent clashes that left many dead, including young and defenseless members of peasant families caught in the turmoil. In summary, the causes of wars in England's history were varied and interconnected, ranging from political power struggles and territorial disputes to religious conflicts and economic competition. Each of these factors created conditions for violent conflict, with devastating consequences for society's most vulnerable members. Recognizing these causes helps explain the tragic human toll, especially among children, whose lives were often lost or irreparably changed in the crossfire of historical wars. Wars have devastating and far-reaching consequences, with children often being among the most affected. In England's historical wars, the impact on children was profound, ranging from direct violence and displacement to long-term psychological and social consequences. The toll of war on children reflects a harsh reality where they suffer through no fault of their own, bearing the burdens of a conflict-ridden world. One of the most immediate impacts of war on children is the threat to their lives due to violence. During conflicts like the English Civil Wars, children were frequently caught in crossfires or killed during sieges. Entire towns were sacked, with soldiers showing little regard for civilian safety. Children who survived these attacks were often left orphaned, forced to fend for themselves in a hostile and unstable environment. Displacement is another severe consequence of war. During World War II, the British government undertook one of the largest evacuations in history, relocating millions of children from cities targeted by Nazi bombing campaigns to safer rural areas. While this policy saved many lives, it came at a significant emotional cost. Families were separated for years, leaving children to grow up in unfamiliar surroundings, often with strangers. The emotional toll of separation caused deep feelings of loneliness, fear, and abandonment that persisted long after the war ended. Wars also disrupt essential services such as education and healthcare, severely affecting children's development. During prolonged conflicts, schools were often closed or destroyed, denying children access to education and a sense of normalcy. In medieval and early modern England, wars disrupted agricultural production, causing food shortages and widespread famine. Malnourished children were more susceptible to disease, with many dying from preventable illnesses. Psychological trauma is another enduring consequence of war for children. The constant exposure to violence, loss of loved ones, and destruction of homes leaves deep emotional scars. During the Blitz in World War II, children lived in constant fear of air raids, often spending nights in dark, cramped shelters. The psychological strain caused by such experiences led to lasting mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Social consequences further compounded the suffering of children affected by war. Orphaned or abandoned children were vulnerable to exploitation, often ending up as child laborers or being recruited into military service. In the aftermath of wars, societies faced the challenge of reintegrating these children, many of whom lacked education, family support, or stable living conditions. The impact of war on children also extended to shaping national policies and humanitarian responses. The suffering endured by children during World War II, for instance, prompted reforms in child welfare and the establishment of international organizations such as UNICEF. These efforts aim to protect children from the horrors of future conflicts and ensure their right to safety education, and a nurturing environment. In historical accounts, the suffering of children in wartime is often overlooked, overshadowed by tales of military strategy and political power plays. Yet their stories are essential to understanding the full human cost of war. Children, as innocent bystanders, suffer consequences they neither caused nor controlled. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship serves as a testament to human endurance, while their suffering underscores the urgent need for peace and conflict prevention. Reflecting on the impact of war on children in England's history highlights the importance of safeguarding future generations from similar tragedies. Understanding the past can inform efforts to protect vulnerable populations, ensuring that children never again have to endure the horrors that war has inflicted throughout history. The aftermath of wars in England's history has left enduring marks on society, reshaping political systems, social structures, and cultural norms. Among the most critical aspects of this aftermath is the human cost, particularly the suffering of children. Their experiences have prompted lasting changes in policy, humanitarian efforts, and collective memory, shaping modern understandings of conflict and its consequences. One of the immediate challenges following wars was rebuilding shattered communities. After World War II, England faced immense destruction, with entire cities like London and Coventry reduced to ruins. Families were displaced and many children were left orphaned. Rebuilding efforts required not only the reconstruction of homes and infrastructure, but also the establishment of social welfare systems aimed at supporting vulnerable populations, including children. The government implemented significant welfare reforms in response to wartime suffering. The Beveridge Report of 1942 laid the foundation for the modern British welfare state, advocating for comprehensive social insurance and public assistance programs. As a result, the National Health Service, NHS, was established in 1948, ensuring free health care for all, including children affected by wartime hardships. This marked a transformative step toward reducing child mortality and improving public health. Education reforms also emerged from the recognition that children needed stability and opportunities for a better future. The 1944 Education Act guaranteed free, compulsory education for all children in England, aiming to break cycles of poverty exacerbated by war. Schools became centers for learning and social support, helping children regain a sense of normalcy after experiencing trauma and displacement. Internationally, the devastation of wars involving children influenced the creation of humanitarian organizations dedicated to child welfare. The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF, established in 1946, sought to provide relief and support for children affected by war worldwide. Its efforts were inspired by the visible suffering of children in post-war Europe, including England. Socially, the shared experience of war fostered a sense of collective responsibility and solidarity. Communities came together to support war orphans and displaced families. Charitable organizations like Save the Children gained prominence, focusing on providing long-term care, education, and protection for vulnerable children. The lessons learned from wars in England have profoundly influenced modern policies on conflict prevention and humanitarian aid. International conventions like the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child reflect a commitment to protecting children from the horrors of war. These legal frameworks ensure that children's welfare remains a global priority in times of crisis. Ultimately, the aftermath of wars in England underscores the resilience of societies in the face of immense suffering. While the tragedies endured by children during wartime cannot be undone, their experiences have driven significant progress in social welfare, education, and international humanitarian efforts. Remembering these lessons serves as a powerful reminder of the need for peace and the protection of future generations from the devastating impacts of war.